everybody, and welcome to episode number 55 of the Board Game Gateway podcast. I am Neeber, and I'm your host for this evening's episode. And with me, I have got, as always, one of my co-hosts, Mr. Ralph.
Hey, everyone.
And we have special guests joining us for another episode. We have Mr. Keith from what would you say your official name for your board game companies? Is it Cutlass Games? Is that what we're going with?
Yeah, Cutlass Board Games. I made the mistake of creating a game, giving up on the game, naming the company after the given up on game, and then coming back and being like, wait, we could make the game.
You know what?
Yeah,
all of that sounds completely fine and a great topic of conversation for tonight's podcast. So if you've never listened to the Board Game Gateway podcast, we are your entryway into the world of board gaming, tabletop gaming, and fun times. And in tonight's episode, we're actually going to be having a good hearty chat about collectible card games and trading card games, TCGs. And we've also invited Keith here for a couple of reasons to have a chat about some of the games that, he's a game designer, as you obviously would have got. We're going to have a chat about some of his previous projects, some of the ones that he's got coming up in the future, and also just what floats his boat when it comes to the world of games. But look, I'm going to say it's great to have you, Keith. I know, again, I will preface this for all of our audio listeners only. We are on Discord, so I do apologize up front for any audio issues. But look, mate, the floor is yours. We're going to open up to the start. We would like to say, introduce yourself to the world of our listening core. Tell us about yourself, how you got into this wonderful world of gaming. What is your current treat? Go for it, and let's get this one underway, shall we?
All right, there's a lot of parts to that.
I know. Well,
let's start with how I got started. That's probably an easy place to start.
Let's start from the beginning, yeah.
So I'm Keith. I'm pretty uninteresting, I feel like. The only thing is what I do, and I make interesting stuff, right? I spend all my time working. Like, on the outset, I work like 12 hours a day, every day. I get hassled a lot for that because when work is fun and you're working in games and you're having fun making games, it's very easy to sit there and do it all the time. But starting out, before this, I was unemployed for a great many years. And when you're unemployed, the Centrelink will just give you any and all work, regardless of how well it suits you. And I worked in a factory for a year and nearly died several times, including from mold poisoning and collapsed on site and all this kind of stuff. I'm rail thin. I got no muscle mass in my entire body. I was never supposed to be on this job site, let alone get a forklift certification and all this kind of stuff. And it basically came to a point where I was like, you know what? I really believe in this game project that I have. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to put it up on Kickstarter and hope for the best.
Love that.
It did just okay. This was in 2017, and game funded. This is Castles of Caleira. We sold 452 pledges, and the game broke even 2.5 years later. And this year, 2024, is the first year that I'm fully self-funded. So,
wow.
It wasn't very successful off the bat, but we made it there in the end. I mean, it's hard, right? I was living on the dole. I was earning $660 a fortnight and spending most of that on art to get my games made and eating 0.7 meals a day every day.
Wow.
So to get here now, and I'm fat now. I'm so proud of myself for being fat now because it means that I'm eating more than one meal a day, and I must have made it. All right.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that is the measure of success.
Look, let's before we move on, let's give, if for people out there who haven't heard of Castles of Caleira, give us a quick elevator pitch of what it is. We've done the research, but I want to let you know what. Like, I want you to tell the people what is this game? Your first game that you designed?
So it's a gorgeously illustrated fantasy medieval castle building micro game. That's my rehearsed elevator pitch that I tell people. Basically, it's love letter, but instead of keeping cards in your hand, it's a tableau builder, and you're trying to have the most points in play instead of holding the single most points card. Which gives you a bit more strategy because you're interacting with other players' cards and you get to play stuff face up or face down. So when something is revealed or what the hidden information is kind of where all of the play in the game is. The first season release, which was the Kickstarter one, was trying to be a little bit more basic with the concepts. And then season 2 and then season 3 is now a bit more competitive, but then you have the flexibility to change what's in this setup, or do I not like this card, or is there something from the list that's not in this setup and I want to change things around? You can put whatever you want into the 18 card setup, so that you can have this interesting tactical adventure. It's like a lot of information is valuable to you, knowing where things are or what's still in the deck because you're drawing from the same deck and stuff like that, and then trying to maximize the amount of points that your castle is worth.
I do like that you said that this is a micro game. I respect that.
18 cards.
Yeah, and that you did a second season, which was like 18 more cards essentially.
There's only like 4 changed from season 1 to season 2, and then season 3, I think it's like another 4. But with the season 3, it includes every card ever printed, right? So you can play a special 4-player mode, which has 30 cards in it, I think.
Love that.
Something like that.
Yeah, I was having. Yeah, when I was having a look at it, I really did enjoy like having a look at it, and kind of for our podcast, we love games that we can play quickly, that we can teach quickly, and this game, for specifically that it was like a micro, like the fact that you had like not a lot of cards. I really liked that fact. I liked the fact that it, one of the things I really liked was when I was scouring the board game geek page. One of the photos is the game being played obviously at an airport, because there's Qantas tickets on the table. And I'm like, well, this looks like a game you literally chuck in the backpack, and you got some time to kill. You could literally
shout out Joel Lewis for that one. One of the big fans, fellow game designer. We all try and do this thing where we gas each other up, but it's always cute to see photos of your game posted by a friend or whatever. And he uploaded that and told me about it later. But it's very small. I've played it on my backpack on a train because it doesn't take up that much space. And it's kind of the advice that I got starting out was I was going to make this big deck builder game, right? And then I talked to some people, and one guy was like, "Don't do that. Make something small. Make Love Letter. Prove that you can do it, and then come back and do a big thing." And so that's literally what I did. I just ripped off Love Letter, made a first game. It turned out all right. And then I just shit the bed constantly for a little while, and then finally started making good games.
Yeah, that's great. I've heard that a lot in sort of the game design school, is you start with a micro game to actually see, all right, I've got this idea. It's either a small mechanic or a theme that you want to build a game around, but you really don't know what it's going to look like. And having built that micro game out of it, you kind of start piecing together your game design brain. So well done. Not everyone can do that. So it's really cool.
Easier to like test and refine. And so, for example, with my current project, which is like big TCG, right? Whenever you try and play, you're like, oh, does my deck suck? Did I fail at deck building? Or is there a fundamental problem with the game? Or is there a fundamental problem with a single card? And it's so much harder to isolate those problems. When it's an 18 card game, we're both using the same deck. It's like, oh, was I just unlucky because they drew the thing that I needed? Or is this card winning every single game on its own? Or is it okay to have something that's kind of powerful if used correctly and stuff like that?
Yeah, I don't mean to knock it, but I've played a bit of Disney Villainous, which you basically start with the standard deck sort of thing. It's a Disney game. I like the theme. My wife really enjoys playing it as well. But you're always just searching for that one card, and it has a mechanic where you say draw 4 cards, discard 4 cards. I'm like, well, that's not fun.
The way you started that sentence, Ralph, was like, I don't want to knock it. As in, like, we're about to knock his game. I was like, wait a minute, what are you about to do? No, I agree with you as well. I really respect, like, when a game, like, for example, there's the series of games, the Mint games, that are, designed to be played in, like, from an Altoids tint. So there's a company where they literally just make a game and basically boil down the essence of what this game is and boil it down to something that can fit in a very small package. Like, one of my favorite games, that you can play is like Love Letter. I love that because the game itself is the cards are the framework that allows the game to actually happen, which can be, what's he holding? What are they not holding? What do I normally think they do?
There's a tension there.
There's a tension that builds. And so, Keith, like, you obviously looking at this, you've mentioned, you designed a micro card game. You just mentioned to us that, well, you're kind of designing your own kind of TCG, which is great. So that must mean, obviously, that you love card games, right? So that's this is where we obviously we had a quick chat about it, but you mentioned that let's tell the people, like, so you are a Magic player to begin with, but now
unfortunately I'm reformed. I promise.
A reformed Magic player, that's fine. But you did mention to us that you are on searching for the Infinity Gauntlet stones of trading card games. So explain to us and our listeners what you kind of meant by that. Like, what is it that you are searching for in terms of, like, how do you gain an Infinity Stone in Magic the Gathering or Marvel Snap, for example?
I mean, it's tough, right? The idea is that I'll pick up a new game and I'll play it, especially the online client ones. It's really easy because you kind of hit the max rank and you go, okay, I think I have an understanding of what I need to do to get there. And you get an understanding of kind of how they work and what the business model is for some of them. And I'll go through, I'll play enough of the game and do a lot of deck building. A lot of these games revolve a lot around deck building. So I need to identify which cards are good, which cards work well together, which cards are worth spending the money on or whatever.
So that's more like the deck construction side of it before you play it,
Yeah. And then can I take what I've taken from understanding the game and build something of my own rather than just like copying a deck list somewhere and being a good pilot. I have to build my own thing and then go and play it and then try and hit the max rank. So in Hearthstone, for example, I played Pirate Aggro all the way up to the highest rank. And then was like, okay, do I really want to stick around and play more of this? Do I feel like there's more to it? I know I played like the most brain dead aggro deck, but I did play around with some other stuff as well, and that just happened to be the thing that rocketed up the ranks the easiest. And then I've come along, I've done Magic the Gathering, I've gone to Mythic in multiple different formats. It's a lot easier because I'm the most familiar with this game. Just playing on Arena, but like I've done now Timeless. I did Historic before Timeless came out, and I've also done the Standard as well. I do like a lot of the more Eternal quote formats, and I'm a big believer in the Arena only digital cards. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people hate them, but I think they're actually very fun to play.
I have to agree with you there. I mean, look, I know, just sorry to cut in there, like one of the things about Hearthstone specifically was when it first came out, it was doing things with card games you couldn't do in an online form. Don't get me wrong. I understand that there is a sanctity that a lot of people say of having the cards, having them physically in your hand. But the advantage of a digital card game is you can do things like Hearthstone was one of the first ones where it's like, like just summon a random card from any of these sets, right? Or whatever it was, that kind of stuff. Really random things that they were like, well, you can't do this in a game. And I really respect like the fact that you said, you like that. And I think that shows your game designer brain is also going, oh, well, like this is showing that they're doing something with the medium that you can't do. And I can understand why people don't like it either. But also at the same point in time, I can see your game designer brain going, well, how can I use something similar?
Yeah. Why was this a choice they made?
Yeah.
Why is this successful? Why do I find this fun to play? A lot of the best cards that are designed from those sets are stuff that you could play in person, but might just require too much memory, or there's a possibility that something could move into a zone that you can't see anymore, but you still need to have that information. For example, there's a sorcery. It's cost 1 blue, and then you draw a card. And if you've played a spell with this name 4 times, you take an extra turn, right? And so that doesn't sound that complicated, but how are you supposed to prove to your opponent that this is the 4th time? Do you show them your graveyard and go, oh, I have 4 copies in the graveyard, I must have cast all 4? What if that zone is shuffled back into the deck? How do I prove that I've cast 4? Am I supposed to be writing notes on the side? And so perpetually increasing the intensity by 1 is the game making notes for you. And Jarsil is probably my favorite example of this. He costs 3, and every turn he'll cast a spell from your discard pile, but it has to cost 1 more than the last time. So all he does is just makes a note of what that number has to be for you, right?
Yeah.
And people are like, oh my God, they've ruined Magic the Gathering. They've added all these digital cards. I'm like, no, they just made something that could have been really complicated, very simple for an online format.
Yeah.
Like Seek as a mechanic is just draw a specific type of card from your deck. Like, they have that in paper, but it just takes a long time because you have to reveal until you hit a correct target, or instead Seek just says, oh, got it, straight away, right? And I don't think that's bad. I think that's fine. But anyway, So I did Magic the Gathering.
Yep.
I've also done Marvel Snap. I currently am just kind of keeping up to date with that one because new and cool stuff's happening. And it's newer, so I'm curious to see what happens with that more long term.
I do like Snaps. Sorry, I do like Snaps.
Snap is
lane format of like almost like it's the pushing left, push right, and actually fighting over different locations. I do enjoy that one.
Yeah, it gives you a good assessment of where you're at in the game state. And then you can make assessments on what's going to happen next. Whereas stuff like Magic the Gathering, you just have a life total, and you're like, well, okay, 20 could be really far from 0. How do you really know?
Exactly right. Yeah.
But yeah, I just finished up Marvel Snap. I'm now currently in the middle of Pokemon TCG, which I'm playing in person and online. So I have an excuse to leave the house and be social, which is nice. And then playing that one like really competitively is really interesting because the difference between casual and serious is gigantic. And the game is actually very hard to play at a very competitive level because compared to Magic the Gathering, Magic on turn 1 always just goes land, go, or land, I cast them in the cost 1. That is the only thing I do, go. Right? In standard formats and stuff like that for the most part. In Pokemon TCG, if you spend less than 3 minutes on your first turn, you're having a shit time. Something is going wrong for you, honestly. You need to fill up your bench with as many Pokemon as you can, play 5 or 6 item cards, and play a supporter that's going to help you get some energy and play or something. And if you're going second, you want to be attacking first or something like that, right? We have to go through all these things, and then every turn after that, you have to try and maintain that pressure and tempo. Right. Whereas Magic is like I start off small and I have to maintain tempo by increasingly getting larger each turn. Whereas Pokemon is I do everything at the beginning and then I got to try and maintain tempo without stopping and doing nothing at any of these times so that I can keep the pressure on the game. Like a completely different graph for your actions per minute, which is really interesting, right? And when you're looking at designing a game and you're seeing these 2 different methods, you're like, well, which one do I like? Which one do I think
you touched on it when you spoke about Hearthstone. It's what do I find fun? Because personally, I've got a bunch of board games behind me right now, and they all have very different mechanics to each other. And there's certain elements that I enjoy in pretty much all these games, and there's some elements I don't enjoy that much. So if you were to design a game, you're picking and choosing what you like.
Yeah, exactly.
But also you want other people to enjoy your game as well. So it's a bit hard to be a solo game designer. So how much time do you put into playtesting your games before you go to Kickstarter or something like that?
A lot. Well, with Cutlass, the current TCG I'm working on, the plan is to just play it a lot and get a lot of people on board and playing and get a lot of people coming in and building decks and working with it and stuff like that. And then when I feel like there's a lot of people playing it, then go to Kickstarter, which is different from a lot of my other projects, which is get to a point where I'm happy with it and then push it. But there's also different goals, right? So, for example, Murders at Tealwoods Manor, another game that I have coming soon, it has a very specific goal. Right? You take Cluedo and you go, okay, here are some clunky things about Cluedo that I don't like. How do I reinvent them with some modern board game design ideas? And then once it like satisfies that goal, you're like, oh, this does play a lot more like Carcassonne or whatever. And you go, okay, that is how the game is supposed to feel and what it's supposed to do. With Cutlass, I was like, I am my target market, unfortunately. I've played Magic the Gathering for 20 years and I'm kind of over it. What do I want to see in a game? What will I enjoy playing in a game? And this whole thing is a vanity project. Normally when I make a board game, I'm like, right, this is how much money I'm spending on it. This is when it needs to be out on Kickstarter. And if it doesn't succeed on Kickstarter, then it's dropped, or I start pitching, or I move on or whatever, right? With this one, I'm like, whatever. As long as it takes, I guess. I'm having fun doing it.
Well, I mean, without spoiling the game or like stuff, but tell me, so going into Cutlass, you said that you're over Magic without spoiling, but what were some of the things that you're like, okay, this is what I want to take from Magic the Game? Like, well, what are the things that you find fun that you would want, not that you obviously take inspiration from, that you would want to see in a new sort of TCG out there? What is something that inspires you, or if you'll, forgive my Marie, whatever her face is, what sparks joy for your TCG?
Marie Kondo.
Yeah, that's Kondo.
with this one going in, the first thing that I wanted to accomplish was you would never ever have a turn where you say nothing, go. Right. So one of the rules we have is if you have no cards in hand at the beginning of a turn, you draw until you have 3 cards. If your opponent is winning, because we have like a treasure system where you score points, if your opponent has more treasures than you, you'll draw an extra card. So you could potentially have every turn have 4 cards in your hand to be able to always be doing stuff. And so it always meant that, okay, knowing this exists, I can be really reckless. I can throw out all my cards. I can play everything. I can grind it down to 0 every turn because I know I'm going to always be drawing back up. And you're not wasting time setting up something where I do have a draw engine to catch me up, but it's not necessarily super helpful to what my game strategy is. Pokemon has a problem with that, where it's like if you don't set up a Pokemon that has a draw engine ability or like searches your deck or something like that, and then you go to no cards in hand, you stop playing the game and you start spectating the game, and it's horrible. And if your opponent does something to stop you from doing this on like the first turn or whatever, and you can no longer draw cards, you're not doing anything, you're just spectating a whole game. You're there for 15 minutes just waiting to play. And that's kind of horrible. And Magic's a little bit the same, where it's like, oh, you didn't draw enough land to play any of the spells in your hand. You drew everything that costs 6 and you have 2 lands, you don't get to play the game. So I wanted to just never encounter this problem. So making sure that you would draw cards, but also the way that cards are played always meant that you could do something. But to kind of explain how it works and lay it down for a little bit,
Please do.
It's somewhere between Magic the Gathering and Wingspan, using that kind of conveyor belt activation thing from Wingspan where you play something to one of the fields, then it's going to activate everything going along in a line. So the thing that I played in the first turn is going to activate every single turn if I play my cards right. And then if I line everything up really efficiently, then I'll get really good activations out of all those different things. And then it's all about being efficient rather than, am I keeping up tempo? Am I doing all these things? You'll always have something to play. It just might not be the one that helps you right now, or you might have to play something really bad because it matches something that's going to activate that's relevant for you this time that you have to do, right? So it's a lot more about keeping the synergy at a high level with the cards that you're playing, rather than specifically, I needed to draw Lightning Bolt on this turn to kill your guy before it attacks and kills me. Like, it still interacts with your opponent, but not like relying on what they're doing or relying on countering what they're doing, which is really hard to explain with just saying. I do show a lot of this stuff on my YouTube channel kind of thing. But
I've seen a few of your videos on Cutlass there, Keith, and there were a few things that drew me to it. You mentioned that you could be really reckless because you're going to be able to draw something into your hand. And if you had created that deck, you know what's in your deck. So you may be waiting for that right card and planning, building the tableau out in front of you until you reach that one card where you can trigger half your tableau there. But what's really cool about being so reckless with your deck, you'll get to a point where you have to shuffle your deck and then you've got to actually discard, or I think you call it banish a card, which is essentially like a trash pile. So you're kind of withering down, because if you have nothing in your draw pile, I believe your game is over.
You do get to reset, right? Whereas like in magical Pokemon, if you have no cards in your deck, you're done. But those cards where they shuffle specific things back into your deck. With this, everything gets shuffled back in like a regular deck builder, but every time you shuffle stuff back in, you're punished for it, so that you can't technically go infinite. But the pirate deck is like, I need to have 10 guys in the bin. And if you shuffle us back into the bin, I stop doing stuff. So you're like, okay, I need to get to 10 as fast as possible and then stop and then try and keep it just like that for as long as I can.
Yeah, so there's kind of like a tempo that you're trying to manage there as well. And look, I love games where it's just a race to so many points. I think this one is just 7 treasures. So I think you're really onto something with Cutlass. I'm really excited to play it one day with you.
Hell yeah, man. I mean, look, I enjoy playing it, and I've played a lot of other different card games with the express intention of making this a fun game to play. And if everything comes out and people are like, man, this game is dog shit, but I'm still having fun playing it, then I win, right? I accomplished everything I set out to do here, and that's fine. Like I said, like, this is a vanity project compared to some of the other stuff that I'm working on, which is a bit more professional and serious. But I've also been working on this game since 2011. I've got all this art from like all that time ago and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, look, it's just finally time. It needs to get made. All this amazing art and stuff that I've got done for it, and finally needs to get some justice and actually get seen by people and played in the game. It just needs to happen.
A couple of months ago, we actually interviewed Stephen Medway, the Blood on the Clock Tower creator. And I found it really interesting because he actually played very minimal social deduction games before diving into the creation of Clock Tower. But your version of game design is completely flipped, where you're diving in and learning the mastery of every TCG out there to develop your one in a way.
For Cutlass, that's what I've done. For other projects that I've worked on in the past, less so.
Mm-hmm.
I've not played a huge range of board games. I don't know if you can see my shelf, but at the top here, we just have anime girl figures. There's my copy of Blood on the Clock Tower.
Beautiful.
That I've made.
And then I just have behind my space station there.
Oh, yeah, I see. And then I have this big shelf of just Australian-made indie games that I'm slowly churning through, right? So I'm not going to accidentally make a game that somebody else nearby has made. But I haven't done any super serious research into other stuff like that. But I've also actually just made a ton of social deduction games. When I first started playing Clock Tower, I got really into the idea of how I can build and design something. And I made a Discord bot where you could play a social deduction game with an infinite number of players 24/7. It would be able to run constantly with any number of players and like auto reset and stuff like that. Because the way the voting system works is if you get 2 other people to agree with you, you kill someone. So if I'm like, this guy has to die, do you want to kill him? And you're like, yes. And then, do you want to kill him? And you're like, yes. Okay. He dies immediately, right? And then that means that every day, if every person does this once, 1/3 of the town dies. And the game goes for 3 days. And then it will reset.
Wow. That sounds like a really interesting project.
Infinite active players you can accommodate, right? But then it means you have to find a large number of people for it to get work. It needs like minimum 9 or something for it to really work properly.
I will say before, because I was thinking about it just before, I don't want to forget, which is that you did mention that you do have the design and the devlogs of Cutlass. So that is on your YouTube channel, which is at Cutlass Board Games. So youtube.com/@Cutlass Board Games. You can go there. Check out Keith's channel. He's got all the videos of his devlog of currently Cutlass. You can actually see some of the artwork he's talking about. And, even testing out. Like, I really actually love seeing that a lot of designers now doing devlogs, a lot of things. Like there's, for example, another one, I know it's not board gaming, but it is, but Jamie.
Stay My Game.
Yes, I've Stay My Games. They do a lot of devlogs about him talking about, all of that stuff.
He does a lot about the industry and stuff as well, which is very helpful.
Yeah, and I really do appreciate the fact that you are willing to talk about the project so openly. Granted, yes, I understand. We can be here and we go, it's all kind of, all talking about the game is good. But there are designers out there which can be very cagey about the idea of letting the ideas into the world for whatever reason. So I do say that, I was actually very interested as well in your second project, which you just kind of mentioned there, which is Murders at Tealwoods Manor, which is what you basically described as reverse murder mystery. So like the way that for regular listeners of our podcast will know that I actually quite like Cluedo, but the way that my family plays Cluedo, me and my brothers now play, it is just a complete information gathering game. So, and by that, what I mean is cheating is 100% allowed. It's just so long as you get the information, however you got it, that is allowed, right? So if you see another person's card, they should have had it closer to their chest. If you were able to, give, so the game itself, and the reason that we do that though is because the base game itself, as you said,
it's lacking.
Has some issues with it in terms of
when was that game designed and released?
In the 70s. Very many years, many years ago, and I think according to Board Game Geek, it was made in 1949, so it's nearly 70.
I was a bit off.
Yeah, so it's nearly 70 or just over 70 years old, right? Yeah. So it's a very old game. So let's have a quick chat about the deconstruction of the mechanics, right? So you say you take something like, obviously you said Blood on the Clock Tower, You love that game. You obviously may have a lot of YouTube videos.
I do. I play this game so much.
At Cutlass Board Games. Yeah, you're part of the Discord. So at Cutlass Board Games on YouTube. Go check out his videos. And then you said, okay, well then that inspired you to take a look at a game that, well, here we are. We got Clue/Cluedo. And let's see what we can do. So what is it? How do you approach your game design? Do you find that you are going straight to, I like this, but how can I make it better? Or do you go to, I don't like this, how can I make a better version of this? How do you find that you're approaching it?
It's different for every project.
Okay.
I know that some designers will do stuff the same way consistently because that's how they tap into their design brain. For me, I've made some games just from a joke that I told somebody one time. Murders at Tealwoods Manor actually had nothing to do with Cluedo at the start.
Okay.
I was with my partner, and I'm always like working on stuff and suggesting stupid ideas, right? And she was like, "What if we made a worker placement game, but it's a house party?" You're like, "Oh, I need to be sitting on the couch because my crush is going to be there," or "I'm stuck waiting in line for the bathroom." And I'm like, "That's fucking amazing! You have to make this game. That's so clever, right?" And obviously, she's not going to do that. She's a librarian. But I was like, "But hang on, this kind of system of the if I'm here in this room, I'm doing this thing." Became the core of what Murders at Tealwoods Manor was. And later on, I thought, "Oh, but what if this strong idea base meets a murder mystery type game?" But the twist on it is it's a reverse murder mystery game because everyone knows who the murderer is, but there's no victims yet. No one's been killed. You're going to be moving people around the mansion, and if the murderer is left alone with somebody, that person dies. And instead of finding out the where, the who, and the weapon, you have secret goals as to which guests need to live and die. So the people that you want to die, you need to leave them alone in the room with the murderer. The people that you need to live, you want to keep them really far away from that guy.
Right.
And so it's
really
all
cool.
in the worker placement, right? So I put this guy down and it's face down, so not everyone knows who that is, but they might be able to guess or read me from what I'm doing, or I might tell another different player information about something because we both sharedly know something about player number 3 or whatever, right? I'm all trying to deduce where to put people and where the murder is going to end up and who they're going to kill so that we can meet our secret goals.
That sounds great.
I legitimately was like, that actually 100% sounds like, yeah, I know Keith is the murderer, but I really need Ralph to be in there with him. And I need to get him in there. And I'm just like, that is so good.
It reminds me a bit of just from that description of a game called Station 4, where everyone has their sort of secret objectives and moving around different locations. As well as even something like Among Us in a way where everyone has their sort of little things to do. But
I made a sort of Among Us game right before Murders at Tealwoods Manor, which was Spaceship Redoubt, which, funnily enough, I had made and developed before Among Us came out, but the elevator pitch is identical. It's based on a Star Trek episode where evil Bill Shatner shows up and tries to take over from the mirror universe, right? So shapeshifters come on board the ship, and they're disguised as crewmates, and the ship's been damaged. And you have to repair the ship or else everybody dies. And everyone's like, that's Among Us. So I'm like, what the fuck is Among Us?
Yeah, wow.
And like being able to look at the genre and see these different kinds of stuff, though. Do I need to be somewhere? Is my character related to this? Or especially Redoubt is a lot more like Coup than it is like Among Us. But the pitch just happened to be identical with how the story came together.
Yeah, geez. Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic game.
I do have a question in regards to bring it back to Cutlass because we are a board gaming podcast and you did mention Wingspan. I do want to ask though, because Wingspan has only been out now for 5 years or so, thereabouts. And you obviously started designing this, as you said, back. You had the idea for it around the early 2010s.
A long time ago.
Yeah. So how do you find, or how do you approach your game design when obviously you must have had a different idea for what you wanted Cutlass to be at the start, but then you've hit something or you've played a game such as Wingspan, you've gone, this engine building mechanic is perfect. Did you find that you had to change the core, like, or do you go back to basics? How do you approach that? Because obviously having something like that, it sounds great to me. I love the idea of an engine builder where it's like I play the next card and then I have to activate this engine. I can see myself getting bigger and rolling on. But how do you approach that when you find that kind of that mechanic? Do you have to strip it back down, back to its core to make sure that it actually fits in? Or was this actually just a case of this is just perfect, we have to go with it?
So the very first version of Cutlass was a Dominion clone.
Okay. Yeah.
But the shop was a little bit more unique and a little bit like Ascension, where there was monsters that you could find.
Yep.
Except the monsters would fight both players, and it was a big sea monster. Like the whole theming is pirates and sea monsters, hence the name Cutlass. And then later on, it became a little bit more like Netrunner, where I would have some stuff hidden face down. Because I really like the idea of this mechanic where I can play a card face down and it's either a crewmate that's going to run and come and get you, or a big scary dragon or whatever, or it's a spell that's going to do a big scary effect or whatever. But when you attack into something, it flips up and it's resolved. Because Cutlass has the same core gameplay system that Castles of Caleira does, where if you play something face up, it activates straight away. If you play something face down, it waits until it is turned face up to then go and activate. And I wanted to try and stick to that because they're both games in the same universe. I wanted it to feel like I've played this. Now I get the next step thing. Oh, I understand some of the same, ideas that are there.
Yep.
And then the kind of Netrunner version of the game wasn't really working, but that was where treasures was first introduced as the victory condition, and you would have specific crewmates that would try and win treasures, or different factions that cared about different win conditions and stuff like that. And it just wasn't quite there yet. Right? And I played Wingspan, and I'm like, man, this game's great. And then when I looked at it, I was like, wait, actually, if these two things come together exactly how I wanted to, then this is actually exactly what I want. This actually works really well. And so, yeah, Wingspan did kind of open my third eye about the game design. And sometimes that's how it's happened, right?
Yeah. No, I
talk
really
a lot about it in that way.
No, I was going to say, and I love the fact that you can obviously tell that game designers do this all over the shop. I was going to say, when Ralph did say, first to 7 treasures, and I'm like, that sounds like Netrunner. It's the first to 7, first to 7 points. And but it's good to hear you say that though, because it is like the idea of, what a game, like card games at least that's what I'm finding. Card games at the moment are coming in such unique varieties at the moment that it's almost like, well, every card game has been invented, right? But what people are doing now is they're saying, well, kind of, but not really, in the sense that you could take this mechanic, we've got this one, but we never had this with this. So let's jam
every
them together.
unique standalone game has been invented, but the Maximus card game that has the best of everything doesn't exist yet.
Exactly right, and I love that. I love that people are like, for example, Damien loves a game that he introduced to us called Yokai Septet, which is a trick-taking game, but it's all about the number 7. So someone was like, well, let's just take the whole concept of trick-taking, but base it around one number, right? So it's like you're trying to get 7 points. You've got 7 cards. You're doing blah, and let's just see what happens with that. So I love hearing when you talk about your design process and go, well, what if we took a pirate theme with the Wingspan building engine, but let's chop it down to what the core of what this, what essentially where Wingspan is all engine building. Your game says, well, what if we took that but actually made it a very confrontational
very TCG Magic the Gathering inspired.
Yeah, I love that. I really do love that. So look, I do want us to try and look. We've talked about your games so much, and I love that. I want to know though, so you did say that you're not a huge board gamer, but what are your favorite board games? We do need to get that out of the way. We need to figure out what they are.
So it's worth saying I've probably played more than 1,500 games of Blood on the Clock Tower.
Wow, that's a lot of games.
I helped run the Sydney scene and was storytelling for a long time. I was part of the playtesting group. I'm the reason why the Fangu text is the way that it is. And And then kind of COVID hit and I kind of stopped for a little while. And then the online client came out and I'm like, I'll try it. It can't be that good. And I'm like, actually, this is fucking better than in person. I'm actually enjoying this so much because the note-taking system is the best.
It's so clever. Yeah.
So good. So I haven't played that in a little while. A lot of the stuff that's going up on my channel is old stuff that's been recorded. But I enjoy that game a lot because it has a lot of flexibility and freedom in how you can storytell. And I think storytelling is the best part. And you can put a lot of stuff together and make stuff happen.
That's what Steven said as well. The creators like one of the best things you can do is storytell the game. I'm keen to do
I do want to say I just storytold at my brother's Bucks party. And there was basically 12 players that I think they've all played one game before. And in the second game, I framed it so the drunk was really suspect of my brother, the buck. And of course, that just the way I was able to throw the buck under scrutiny just by giving the drunk false information was just
bully
amazing.
Players all the time.
Yeah, it was really cool.
I love hearing these stories from storytellers. Like, that guy was just being annoying, and
I've accidentally bullied people before. Just like it's. So one of the guys that I played with regularly, I know that he's way more skilled than some of the other people in the group. And some things would happen where I'm like, okay, for game balance, I can't give you everything, or this awkward thing has to happen. Like I had the spy being targeted by this sailor, and I'm like, and the spy hasn't seen the grimoire yet because the sailor activates really early. So I'm like, I could poison the spy here and just show him a shit grimoire.
Yeah.
Which I did, but I changed all the characters, but not what was affecting them. So he could see all the effects active, but not who the people actually were. So he was like, wait, I can see that I'm drunk right now. Is that right? I'm like, sure, I'm just kind of seeing how all that comes together. And he's like, why are you bullying me like this? You're so mean to me.
Yeah,
it's not intentional, but it's for game balance, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, but that's part of the fun of it, though, right? That's what we talked about. The creativity of Clock Tower is a lot of it in what the storyteller can actually achieve just by showing the information to people, maybe not in the way that they thought they were going to use. But then, for example, like you said, your mind goes, I've got a player, they're really good, but given the way that this all activates, that means I could do this, which I think that would be a lot of fun. Like the fact that you're just like, I could just create an absolute crap grimoire.
Yeah.
You know what? Stuff it. That's what I'm going to do, right? And the fact that you can do that, that's the huge thing where it's like, and I have played the least amount of Clock Tower in our group, right? But I love the game for those reasons. And even though, like in the last meetup that I went to, I was playing in a group of relatively experienced people, and I was probably one of the least experienced people there. But I was the demon in this group of sex and violence, right? So we won. Partially because I was just like, you can play the social game. You don't actually need to do you don't need to be super smart. You could just be like, I don't know. I think something's weird here. And just like throw little eggs around the place. And then people are like, what the hell happened there? Like, it's like, it's all kind of stuff. I did see that you do have Azul back there. Am I correct? Was that Azul that I saw back there?
Yeah, so this one, we've got Azul. Next to that is Sagrada. We've also got Reef, which is right next to that. Nice. I've also got Moonshell, which is along here somewhere.
Yeah,
can't quite see it to point at it. Which they're all kind of in the same kind of area. I really like Moonshell. I think it's the best one. It's which is big to say, better than Azul, right? It has this cool board in the center that you are all picking stuff off, similar to Azul, but it rotates, and the way that it rotates is where you can pick things from. So you have a lot of weird controllers to making other people pick certain things or what you can pick and stuff like that. And I think that's genius. Really, really clever way of putting it together.
Fantastic. So what would you say? All right. Well, let's go back to your board game development, right? So you just told us that you finally now hit. You're in the black. You finally hit. Your first couple of seasons have hit. You've broken even, which is fantastic to hear. I always love to hear, especially for someone local, because let's be honest, here in Australia, our market.
There's four of us. There's 4 game designers in the board game space that earn enough to be full time and not have a day job.
Well, there you go. Right. So that is huge. And the fact that
it sucks for all the other people that don't quite make it, and that's why I try and support the homies. But I got to be proud that I am one of the people that did make it.
And we're super proud as well that you have achieved that. We're also super thankful that you came here and had a chat to us about it. But let's go and talk about, okay, so what are some of the lessons that you have learned in your game development, your game, I guess we spoke about this with Stephen, about the business of board games. In our Blind the Clock, and that's half of the battle as well. Like getting your game is 90% of the work, but it's only half of the battle about getting to that next point. So what would you say is some of the lessons?
Making a game is like 10% of everything you have to do, actually.
Right. Okay. Well,
90% is running a small business.
Well, there you go. So so what would you say? So what are some of the lessons that you've learned along the way in regards to all of that? Like, let's start there.
I keep doing this thing where. So imagine you're a poker player.
Yep.
There's 5 other people at the table. They've all got more chips than you. And you see your opening hand. It's Jack 9. And you shove all your chips in the pile. And everyone else looks at you like an idiot. Be like, I'm just so confident. And they're like, okay. And then they just have a better hand and play it and you win. Right? That's kind of how I ran the first couple of campaigns for all of my games. I go, I have made something. It looks nice. I am a fucking genius. How could I do? My first game is a massive success. I've never failed before. How could this ever go wrong? And then, like I said, I just kind of shit the bed on repeat for a little while, and then kind of realized that actually maybe this is not as what people want, or this is not as good, or I didn't do enough market research, or whatever. A whole bunch of different things can contribute to the failure of a campaign. I've failed way more campaigns than I've succeeded, but I've had more projects that have failed on Kickstarter that have become a successful product later. So all of it is just kind of knowing what your path is. For a designer like me, making multiple games is kind of what you need to be doing.
Yeah. Okay.
Usually you can become self-sufficient on game 7 if games 1 through 6 are reprinting every year or so.
Right,
especially if they're smaller ones, right? With something much bigger like Clock Tower, where it's like selling one of them is you get $200, is a bit different mathematically. And it's hard to kind of put together how all of these things are supposed to work when you're starting out. Because like I didn't study, I didn't go to university. I've just kind of been unemployed my entire life, and not very good at that either, apparently. And you put it together, okay, this is the game. I believe in this 1,000,000%. The advice that I always used was invest in yourself like you're betting on yourself to succeed. And I would just run it down. I'd be like, look, I believe in this 100%. I have fun doing this. I think this is a great game. It contributes something new to the world. I'm going to do everything I can to make this thing happen. And sometimes Kickstarter's not the place for that. Kickstarter has a really niche market base of what people enjoy when it comes from games. And they have miniatures, and they have a shitload of add-ons, and it's hard to carry from one room to the other. That's kind of the thing that goes successful on Kickstarter. And I made 18 card games.
The spire behind me there.
Yeah, right? All the big stuff, And I made small games. I still make mostly small games. Notice it Tealwoods Manor. You can see the box up there. It's about this big.
Yep.
Small.
Some of my favorite games are that small box size. Seven Wonders Duel is literally that. It's literally that kind of square box. Is one of my favorite games of all time. And I think
it doesn't mean it belongs on Kickstarter, right?
No, exactly right. And it did 5 years ago, but now I think the Gloomhavens, the Slay the Spires of the world, the Kingdom Death Monsters, etc., the stuff with the add-ons. Yeah. Well, that's great to hear as well. That that you can fully sustain yourself. That's so good to hear. But I guess how much?
The follow-up question is how.
Well, yeah, I guess without obviously there's so much that's such a loaded question of how. It's like how do you run a small business, as you said, right? But I guess did you find the business side of it? I guess harder is not the right word that I'm looking for here. But did you find, because you said yourself, right? You are self-taught, self-funded. Did you find that the stress of the business side of it, did that ever swayed how you were looking at your game design, or did you, as you said, you just backed yourself, like as in, no, I'm making the game that I believe in, and the audience will come from that. Like, because
some stuff just kind of comes up and goes, is this actually viable? I've had a couple of game designs. I'm like, this is a banger, and it just sits on the shelf of death where it's not going to ever go anywhere. And it's just kind of, I have this one that I really like, which is like a modern interpretation of Boggle. I have this thing where I just go back to the well of what's a game that exists, but it's kind of shit actually now that it's been around for 700 years. So we've seen Cluedo, and now we're seeing Boggle. And I've also got
auntie will fight you on that one, my friend. My auntie. What do you mean?
Boggle is still a good game, but I know what more to be iterated in that space, right?
I know what you mean, yeah.
And so I built up this thing, and I looked at it, and this is fun to play, except the cost to manufacture it in the way that I want is too expensive. And that kills the project, right? Like if I can't do it in a way where it's going to feel unique and deluxe, like the reason why Boggle is so successful is it's 16 wooden cubes, a little bit of paint on them, and this shitty plastic tin, which is usually, if you've ever seen somebody's copy at home, held together with a rubber band. Now, for me to build the game that I want, I have these really nice made dice, and if you've played Sagrada, it has the punch out where you can sit the dice in it all nicely and stuff. I want all these things. Yeah, I'm like, this is a non-negotiable for this project. It's required, and it's too expensive. So I'm like, okay, I can't sell this game at the $80 or whatever that the manufacturing costs will require. Therefore, it's not viable for me to be able to create it as a product. I'll have to move on and work on something else. And that's happened a couple of times. But when you're working and stuff, it's just like mono cards. Like Cutlass is just cards. And you're like, well, cards cost nothing. And that's easy. I can never get out specified on what I'm trying to put together. I'm never going to have that problem.
You're selling some games on Print and Play Arcade as well because of that.
Yeah, I love that place, honestly. Because it's really great for 18 card games, right? It's two sheets of paper. It's perfect.
That's really cool.
Yeah. They've been really good to me as well. But yeah, basically to answer the how is I've found a lot of other different secondary ways of selling product. Also, Cutlass Board Games is two things. It makes board games, but also makes video games as well. So video games makes all the money, and then board games wastes all the money. That's kind of how it goes. Because the difference is like video games can make money now. Oh, the Steam sale is on right now, actually. Cool. That's generating an income. And then I invest that in board games, which is a much longer process to see the profit turnover. Right. But the upside is that I go, okay, Castles of Caleira is now sold out and I'm doing a reprint. I don't have to spend any time and money on the reprint. I just go, yes, I would like more copies. And they keep selling. And then you can, in theory, do that forever. In the same way that a digital game is going to always be in the store. But eventually a digital game gets to a point where people are like, oh, this is, too far gone. The algo doesn't believe in it. The Steam has this thing where you can set things up for marketing rounds. And if you kind of run out of marketing rounds, then the game's going to stop getting delivered to people and stuff like that. So you're like, well, technically has an infinite shelf life in some way. And so you try and work that for the long term and then use other stuff for the short term.
CSGO 2. Just make Castles of Caleira 2. What's new about it? The cards have got a new name. And
we have an extra C.
And
it's got a new skin.
The smoke effects are a bit new. So,
yeah.
No, well, that's really interesting to hear you talk about, though, because this is one of the reasons why I really enjoy talking to game designers, because there's so much more than goes into we've all sat here and gone, I've got a great idea for a game. I'll tell you my elevator pitch. Right, my game that I came because I'm an IT guy, so I work in IT support. So I went, well, there are so many funny things that happen on a day-to-day basis. Maybe I could create, the Y2K board game, which is a real-time, game that requires you to have sand timers, a la like Kitchen Rush and these other games, right? You've got to come in here and do all that kind of stuff, right? But then that's the game idea in my head, but my financial brain doesn't go, but what's the cost per sand timer? Are they all going to be different colors? The manufacturing, are they going to be different colors? You need different timers because some may be different, maybe different priorities. So, code red is
stuff as well.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's interesting to go that there are, and also the fact that I do want to talk about that, mention that. So your social deduction game, your reverse Cluedo game, when it was already on Kickstarter and didn't hit the goal, right?
Yeah, but we're still making it.
But you're still making it, right? So it's like the fact it almost feels like the year 12 student, right, in Australia. It's like going for the UAI or the ATAR now, right? And going, I totally botched it. I'm not going to uni. And then 3 years later, they're just like, yeah, I'm just going to go in as an adult, no problems.
Yeah,
in we go, right? Yeah, mutation, in we go, no issues. And it's like, it's interesting to hear though that it's like, yeah, you know what, games can fail. The pitch could suck. There are some things that I probably should get better at. And then you go, no, but I still believe in this product, and I'm still going to take it and do what I need to do. I'm super,
there's a million allegories for this, right? But I think my favorite one is Squid Game. There's a script that sat on my shelf for like 10 years or some bullshit. And you're like, this made squillions of dollars on Netflix because it was just waiting for the right time. It was waiting for the right person to come along and make it. It was waiting for the right studio to come and pick it up. With board games specifically, there's kind of two routes that you can go down because there's no bad game. And there's never a wrong game. And I fully believe in there's no bad game. And I played a game which was Monopoly that added stocks and trading, and you had to do your tax return at the end of each game year. And would have killed me if I played it for more than 4 hours, but I don't believe it's a bad game, right? And all it's needing to find is a player base of people that this is a need that needs to be served, right? People are like, man, I played Monopoly and I just wish it was crunchier. And I'm sure that person exists. They probably work in accounting. And then, you know, how am I going to be able to...
Too many accountants that will be really into that. I'm sorry.
Probably. Who knows, right? I mean, some guy made it. He had to have thought it was fun and had to have enjoyed playing it. So there's at least one guy. I mean, surely he's not the only one. And I think about this about a lot of stuff, right? Yeah. Me building something because I enjoyed playing Magic the Gathering, there's probably other people that played Magic the Gathering and go, actually, I see what you're cooking here. I kind of want this, right? But I think the two paths thing is important, right? Everything I do is one path where I'm responsible for everything. I make the game, I get all the art done, I do a bunch of graphic design, I build it out, I test it, I build the product, I go to the manufacturer, I build it, I have the stock, I try and sell it to people, find Kickstarter. If that doesn't work, then I'll find somebody else that wants to pick up copies. I usually work with the Quest suppliers, they do a lot of stuff like that, where we co-publish, we get a print run done, they'll have it for sale in their store, and then they can fulfill it overseas and stuff, whatever, but they'll always have it at conventions to sell it, right? That's what my pipeline looks like. I come to them with a whole product and I go, let's try and sell it, baby. Option two is you go, I believe in this game so much. I don't know that I can take it the way there. I need to find a publisher that believes in the game as much as me and will help me take that extra mile. And so we see stuff like Good Games Publishing picks up a lot of indie games in Australia and goes, I see what this is doing. We need to change maybe these one or two things, and it needs to do this as well. And then bam, it's perfect. It's in our store straight away. Let's go. And so you have your game. You go, either I trust I can take it the whole way there, or I need to find somebody that can help me do that, right? And that might take time. You taking it yourself the whole way there might take a long time. Drift, which is Good Game Publishing's latest thing coming soon, it was in development for years before it got to the point where it is now, where it's still in more development before it's getting published by Good Games.
Yeah, I don't know when that's going to get published. I can't wait for that.
We actually, all going well, have James Allen bringing Drift to our board game day in August. Now,
we love James.
Yeah, James is great. We've also we played a TTS, an early TTS version of a Tealwoods Manor.
Yeah, I did too. When we had COVID packs, I got a chance to play it online.
Yeah, so we actually recorded a Let's Play, and James was like, dude, I legitimately was like, this is one of the most ridiculous games I've ever played. Yeah. Because it's a race game where you don't want to take the most efficient path. Like, that's like, in my head, it makes no sense. Like, it's a race game where you want to take the outside line, which is the slow lane, so you can get into the drift zone, so you can get your power ups to do stuff later on. And like, it was so much, and the fact that there's the real time clock. Right, anyway, we're talking about that anyway, but that,
I genuinely think that will become one of the greatest games of all time when it finally comes out.
I legitimately am super excited for it because there's no other game like it. The fact that it's got this real time building to it. But again, that's something that James saw. He goes, I like a racing game, but I feel like
Flamme Rouge just didn't get there, I guess.
Yeah, well, he wanted to, and that's the thing. I think he wanted to create a feeling of the franticness of cars rushing around the corner, which you could only get through the real time of you have to build your route in real time, and away you go, right? But that's really good that you say that. We talk about, and we're going to start to bring this one to a close, Keith, because I think it's been so great to hear you say that
again. Yeah.
But it is great to hear that you are backing, like you actually talk very candidly about both options, because you're like, no, there are times where it's like, no, I can go the whole way with this one. The other time, and maybe like this one I really like, but I think
often people are presented with both.
Okay.
Joel Lewis, for example, who we shouted out earlier, made Fluttering Souls, which is another similar small box card game from what I made. And at the time when he was working on it, he was like, what did you do? How did this go for you? And all this kind of stuff. And he goes, Good Games Publishing approached me and they're interested in it. And I'm like, what the fuck are you asking me for? You say yes, and then you figure out later on if you can take some other game to part. This guy has already offered to do all of the hard stuff for you, and you can learn how that works on the job, basically. And then you can figure the rest of it out in your spare time for game 2 or whatever, right? But it's hard to know, right? It's like, in video game, publishers are almost always there to screw you out of your money. They're almost always there to take everything and leave you with nothing, right? It's incredibly predatory. And publishing in board games is very different. And a lot of the time, it's a lot more equitable and more discussion is kind of happening, or you're just like dropping your baby off at the park and you don't care because you're like, here's my idea, here's the thing, sick, I'll collect my check, whatever, you guys can do whatever you want with it after this point. And like, that's also fine.
I think it can work the other way as well. If you have that passion project and you don't want it to be changed, then I could see why.
That's when you're like, okay, I'm going to take it the whole way myself. That's kind of what happened with me with Castles of Caleira, right? I had invested the only money that I had in the world and got this amazing art illustrated for it. And then I had kind of built it. I'm like, look, this is ready to go. I'm ready to sell this. And I approached Buttonshy, who is like a notorious 18 card publisher. Yep. And I go, cool, this is my game. Are you guys interested in it? And they're like, yeah, it looks fun. Like, it's fun to play, but we'd have to replace all the art. And I'm like, get fucked. Why? It's amazing, right? You just want to own the rights to everything instead of me. I don't see the point in that. I'm going to make the game, which is already gorgeous, go and be a success instead, right? I don't know why you would want to change this. But so there is obviously that kind of thing as well. But kind of understanding what the journey looks like is hard until you've kind of done it and failed already. And I failed a bunch of times, and I would like to help other people not fail a bunch of times, because it sucks when it happens, right? I've never been more depressed in my life than watching a Kickstarter fail in real time. And you're still there for another fucking 14 days before you get to finally call it quits. And it's soul destroying, let me tell you. And if me getting on a podcast and being like, look, here's some ideas, or here's some tips, or some people to talk to, or whatever, some things that might help you get started, and you get to avoid that whole heartbreak, that'd be fantastic.
Well, that's kind of what drew me to your YouTube channel as well, because you've got those vlog videos, and I enjoy watching the Jamie Stegmaier's ones as well. And then it was actually kind of a bit nerdy of me. I bumped into you awkwardly at a Clock Tower show, and I was like, "Oh, I know you from your channel, but I can't remember your name." And yeah, so that was pretty cool.
I will say, I will say on behalf of myself and Ralph, thank you for being so open and candid about it, and thank you to the board game community at large, because this is something that we don't really hear about in the board gaming scene. Like, generally, the avid board gamers will know, the game's on Kickstarter. These guys have troubles. What's going on, but we don't really ever talk about what happens behind the scene. And I think, given the fact that we are well and truly in the golden age of board game / tabletop game /
for real,
I think that we have a lot of young kids in the teenage years coming up who are looking at games and going, man, I'd love to make a game, but I have no idea where to start. So I really do, like you said, I hope we can use conversations like this to help shine a light on people like, hey, you're going to have failures, but that's okay. And in fact, those failures may actually become real positive, because you may be able to turn it around and just a failure is not the end. It is just a stepping stone to something else. And I think that's really great.
Well, the late, great James Math gave me a piece of advice, which was when he was starting out, he had a hit rate of 1 in 3. And when you're on game 2 and it's failing, you're like, I could fuck up one more of these before I can have a success, and I'm still doing great.
That is so good. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. And with that, I think it is time for us to bring it to the end of the episode. So, Keith, before we start getting out of this one, is there anything that you would like to shout out? You would like people to go check out that you want to give out? Yeah,
I mean, I've got a whole bunch of stuff kind of running at the moment. Probably the easiest place to find most of my stuff is Twitter or YouTube. On YouTube, I'm more likely to sit in front of the camera and talk about what's happening. But my current game projects that are happening is Cutlass Board Game. If you find your way onto our Discord via YouTube, is probably the easiest way. But you can just get the whole print and play for free. Is on there. You can come play it. You can also play it online for free using Cockatrice. And just come check it out. Come and play it and tell me what you think. That's the cost of playing the game. Just give me your damn opinion. That's totally fine. I've also got Murders at Tealwoods Manor, which is the reverse murder mystery game, which I'm really excited about. And Castles of Caleira Deluxe Edition. They're both getting reprints at the same time. They're all going to come together. We're hoping to have stock ready for it at PAX, but it's already up for pre-order on the Quest Suppliers store. So check out the Quest Suppliers as well. They've been a partner of mine and they've been really good. And I also just announced a new video game studio where I'm going to be working on stuff at the same time, which is Jaffel Studios, which is Australian-based. We're going to be making a bunch of video games as well, which might eventually transition into board games as well. So I'm doing too much stuff. But go and check some of that out.
Well, that too much stuff. Hopefully, we can get you back on in a future episode. We can talk about some of this too much stuff that you're working on. That'd be great to do.
For sure.
So as you said, his YouTube, the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Cutlass Board Games. Make sure you go there. The links are there. So to his Twitter/X, the Patreon that's up there, the other website as well. So they're all there. Go check that out there for the developers. So, look, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to episode number 55 of the Board Game Gateways podcast. I'd like to shout out especially big thank you to Keith for coming in and sharing your insights into this. This has been an absolutely fantastic talk. On behalf of myself, of my co-host Ralph, he's over on this side of the camera, and of course of Keith, I'd like to say thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Take care, bye.
Bye.
See you, Ralph.